All right, I'm recording. Go ahead.
So I know you're probably still early in your sort of assessment phase, but the big question I think the residents want to know is, can they expect additional rate increases beyond the one that just took effect this month from what the previous board had done? Do you have a sense for whether there's a way out of that without that?
Well, certainly they can't expect a rate increase anytime in the short term. There's just been a pretty significant rate increase, that started on November 1. My job initially is to determine what's needed to improve this system to make sure we have a reliable system and one that really protects public health, both on the water and the wastewater side, and then develop a plan on how do we achieve those goals the most cost-effective way. It's only after you determine what you need to do and how you're going to do it that you can really figure out how much money you need to get that done. And we hope to get as much of that money as we possibly can through grants and low-interest loans, as opposed to from the customer rates. And so you have to determine what you want to do, how you're going to finance it, and after you do all of that, you can determine what type of revenue stream we need coming in through rates. So it's going to be a while until I get to that point.
And I guess, in terms of what the system needs, I mean, a lot of it's not really a mystery or a secret, I don't think. It's got very old infrastructure. It wasn't maintained for decades, and there's these leaks all over the system. I think the testimony has been that for every gallon that Prichard buys from malls, it loses a gallon to the ground. So that seems pretty straightforward, right? Is identify the leaks and fix them, and it's just a cost issue, right?
No, it's not that simple. We know that there's leakage from the system. The question is, how do you get your most bang for your bucks? Where do you best invest? So for instance, the thoughts would be, maybe there's a lot of leakage in the Alabama Village area. Maybe that's the first place to spend the money. Or there are other locations within the system that you can reduce leakage, protect public health, and improve reliability the best. So we know we need to spend a lot of money, but the question is, where do you spend it best? And don't forget, we also need to spend a bunch of money on the wastewater system as well. There's actually a consent order in place in the wastewater system that requires us to do improvements both at the treatment plants and within the system to improve the discharge to the water courses, in the area. So it's then how do you best spend the money across both the water and the wastewater system to minimize the rate impact on customers in the future and give them the quality of service that they deserve.
And you mentioned Alabama Village. The previous board was exploring an idea of buying out the few remaining residents that are there and just shutting it down, and that would be the most cost-effective way. Any thoughts on that?
I'm 3 weeks on the job. That's certainly an option I need to explore, but that's just one of many, many options that I need to take a look at.
There's been well-documented, fraud and mismanagement in the system. Do you have a sense for how much of the problems that the system has is due to actual theft of some of this money, or is that just sort of a bad look on top of underlying problems that don't really have anything to do with that?
Well, clearly my focus is moving forward and not looking backwards, although I do need to, at some point look backwards and see how we got here. But the focus is really moving forward. But if you need to look at some of the decisions that have been made over the last couple of decades and the lack of investment into the infrastructure. That's the real problem here. Utilities need to keep up. As pipes depreciate, you need to replace them, or you're going to get issues like water loss and leakage and things such as that. So it's the long-term management decisions that have been made here that really puts them where they are today. And then the question is, how do you best move forward and minimize the rate impact on the customer?
And you're here obviously because the investors that bought these bonds, I guess it's maybe not quite hard to say they weren't getting their money, but they were not following through on their commitments to make these payments into this bond fund. And from what I can see, there's still a lot of that money left that was borrowed. How much freedom do you have to use that money to address some of these problems, as opposed to the bondholders wanting to get the money back?
Well, I think it's important to point out is I'm here because the courts decided that I was the best person to try to solve this problem. I don't report to the bondholders. You know, I need to make sure that the utility is properly run. I have to make sure the customers are properly served, and I need to make sure the investors are paid back. And the reason I have to make sure the investors are paid back because Prichard Water will need access to the capital markets to make all the improvements that they need to do in their system. So I need to get the right balance, you know, between those three entities, you know, moving forward. Now, with respect to access to the money of the bond trustee, I don't know for sure, but I guarantee you I will not get access to that money unless I have a good, well thought out plan. But that's not only the money from the bond trustee, that's money from any source, whether it be grant money, low interest money from the state, money from the county. You have to have a good plan put together. And that's what my initial focus is on.
A lot of what Prichard Water Board was wanting to spend that money on was to develop an independent water source so that it would alleviate the need of having to buy it wholesale. And I'm still not clear on what went wrong with that. I think maybe they did a test well that didn't pan out, and then had made some progress on another one. Are you far enough in to know whether that's a viable solution to to dig these wells and get out from under having to purchase it?
As I said, I need to look at all options. That may not only be groundwater, which I've gotten smart on pretty quickly, but I also maybe look at surface water. The one time they have a surface water treatment plant, and is it possible and cost effective to do that again? So both groundwater and surface water is going to be looked at.
And then, there's the whole, politics end of this. Obviously, it's been very contentious, and I'm sure you followed. Even within the board, there's a lot of contention. How do you plan to navigate that? The current board, which I guess remains in place, and the Citizens Advisory Council, and just the citizens in general. I mean, even though I guess you're the ultimate decision maker, there's still a lot of constituents that you have to, deal with.
The only way to do that is be as transparent as possible. You need to solicit input from everybody who has valuable input, whether it's from your advisory council. I've already met with both mayors. I've met with the team that put together the concession. So I'm already looking at all of the options that people have spent a lot of time putting them together. It's been a lot of time and a lot of money spent before I ever arrived, and I ought to take advantage of all of that. And then move forward and thoroughly examine, all of the options. But I have this advisory council that I'm going to be meeting with periodically. Hopefully the first meeting is going to be sometime this month. I'm right now getting the members from that council pulled together. I have monthly reports that I will submit to the judge and to the public, and we're putting together a whole communication plan. This only works if everybody is moving in the same direction. I can't solve this problem by myself. This is going to be a problem that's solved at the local level, at the state level, and potentially the federal level with the amount of money that we need to resolve this problem.
And you've got experience with this sort of thing. You were the receiver in Jefferson County, and I guess you technically weren't the receiver in Flint, right? But you sort of had a similar type role up there.
Yeah, for the last 12 years of my career, I've primarily supported what I'll call troubled water systems that have infrastructure problems, have affordability problems, primarily some very, very diverse communities. So I worked in Detroit, I worked in Puerto Rico, I spent 5 years leading the recovery efforts in Flint, Michigan, and other troubled systems in Michigan. And, Prichard certainly is a challenge, but I think the problems are very similar. It's just a question of degree of problems. And this one may take a little bit longer to solve given the state of the infrastructure and the affordability. But we need to go down every road to see if we can find a solution.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you is where this kind of fits in the other systems you've been a part of. Similar, but does it seem worse? Kind of pound for pound. Obviously, we're smaller than Jefferson County, but pound for pound, does it seem like it's more challenging here than these other places?
Well, Jefferson County was a problem of more of a financial problem. The infrastructure was in pretty good shape. They did have a consent order, but they were moving forward to comply. Jefferson County was really an issue driven by some of the corruption and the amount of debt. I mean, they had $3.2 billion of debt. Right now here we're talking about a bond offering of $55 million. But if you take a look at issues like condition of infrastructure, affordability issues, consent order issues, public health issues, this has basically all of those concerns. Although I need to emphasize, the water that the customers of Prichard are consuming right now meets all regulatory standards, so they're doing pretty good as from a quality perspective.
And another thing that I know this system has struggled with, and I guess it's not unique to here, is finding and retaining qualified workers to run the treatment plant operators. I take it that's something that utilities are struggling with across the country, and how do you address that?
That's a universal problem across the country. One thing you need to have is you need to have stability within the utility, and there's one thing I don't think Prichard Water's had for a while is what I'll call stability of the management and their approaches. So somebody's only going to come work for a utility if they're comfortable with the culture and the stability, and they know they can kind of make a career out of it. So that's one thing I need to restore, is that stability, and then basically guarantee you that we can give them the proper training and the resources they need to do their job, and that gets to the tools they have, the education they have, the vehicles they have. You want to be successful, and the only way you can be successful if you're given proper resources, and that's one of the things I'm certainly looking at.
And I know there's some dates and deadlines and requirements in the court order for you. You have to produce this comprehensive plan, I guess, by next summer, and these monthly reports. Beyond that, though, it seems like it's pretty open-ended, and it's really you to decide when your work is done and when the system is on a stable path.
The timeline is a challenge. I have to have completed a draft, what we call a draft master plan, by the middle of next year. That'll be looking at all of the options. And then the question is, how do we best fund that plan? By grant money, by low interest money, by customer rates, whatever. But the really important part of this is I have to leave behind me an entity that will implement the plan properly, because this will not be a 1-year plan or a 2-year plan. You can't solve the infrastructure problems in 1 or 2 years. This will be a plan that goes across decades and requires investment across decades. And so it'll require access to the bond market again and other things. So the entity that I leave behind, the structure that I leave behind, the talent that I leave behind needs to do that. So that's as important as the overall solution, the entity that I leave behind that's going to implement the plan.
And is that something you have the power to just kind of do, or if you're talking about changing the structure, that some sort of permanent change to the makeup of this board or how it operates, would that require the state legislature to change that, or can you do that? You're independent of that?
It really depends on what the best solution is. I'm not going to end up at a solution just because I have the power to do it. I'm going to take a look at what's best for the overall customer. And if it requires me to go to the state legislature, that's what I would do. If I can do it with the power that I have receiver, that's what I would do. If it's returning the board to the status quo, that's what I will do. There are very many options out there, but at the end of the day, and I need to focus on it, what provides proper public health protection, what provides proper reliability, and how do we deliver that at the least cost possible to the customer.
What percentage of your time would you estimate you're going to be here versus home? I think you're going to be going back and forth a lot.
Initially, I'm going to spend a lot of time here. As I said earlier, there's a lot of work that's been done. There's a lot of people who invested a lot of time into this, and I need to basically meet with people, get the information they have, pick their brains on solutions. Then I need to bring in support to help me take a look at what a well supply would cost, what a surface water treatment plant would cost, what these various options are. And so I'll be working with a lot of the best firms in the country to put that type of information together. I need to do an affordability analysis to determine what these customers can afford to pay. So initially there'll be a lot of time spent here, and then then after that it'll be time working with my various team members to put together this draft master plan.
And is that, I think in Jefferson County you actually had a townhouse that you had purchased or rented. Are you going that route, or are you just doing this at hotels, or?
I don't know yet. I've been here 3 weeks. So let me let me figure out what that'd be. But I'm going to do whatever it takes to be successful. Not personally successful, but successful for the customers of Prichard.
And you also inherit, I guess, there's some pending litigation. There's these lawsuits that these customers have filed over these excessive bills. There's still, I think, some outstanding issue in the lawsuit between the city and the water board over whether fees can be charged or I guess increased on these fire hydrants. I mean, are you leaving in place any of the lawyers that were working on that, or are you bringing in new counsel just to take a fresh look at all that? How are you handling that?
Well, there are issues that I need to address. How I need to address them, I haven't determined the best way to do that yet, but there are issues I need to address.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate doing
Let's get
this.
some two
You're just gonna
shots.
get